It's a crisp winter morning in North Cheyenne Canyon Park, a 1,600-acre nature preserve on the outskirts of Colorado Springs.
Cheyenne Canyon, there's a lot of pretty scenery up in there.
It's a really popular hiking spot. There is a winding system of trails. You can go up and up and up. It's actually steep enough, it can be kind of dangerous.
Park Ranger Ron Leisure is out on a routine patrol.
That morning, he was driving along an open creek bed, very close to the main road.
He observed what he thought was some trash. People go up and party there and then just leave the trash.
I would guess his first instinct was probably that a bag blew out of something. And if you see something on the ground trash-wise, you're gonna go pick it up. So he sees this pile of stuff.
From the corner of his eye, the ranger notices something unusual in a nearby creek bed.
We're on to base.
When he went down further to investigate, he found a body lying in the creek. He was only in his underwear, and his clothing was located off to the right and above him.
There's that old survival instinct that humans have where if you see something lying dead, everything about you is saying, get out of here, get out of here, get out of here.
5 miles away, at the El Paso County Courthouse, Lt.Joe Kenda has just finished testifying in a murder trial.
That particular morning, I was in court. I just left the courthouse building, and I was walking down the courthouse steps, and my pager went off, and it said 911. That's a code to me that this is a murder, and I should call into the comm center.
As Kenda makes his way to Canyon Park, sheriff's helicopters confirm the location of the body.
You'll see us in light blue shirts walking here toward the creek where the victim is.
Lieutenant, Detective Moore, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Who found the body?
The park ranger over here then.
I find marked units and Park Ranger Leisure.
You found the body?
That's right.
Tell me what happened.
I was on my normal patrols and I stopped to pick up some trash, and then I noticed some clothing down there. And as I went to pick up the clothing, that's when I noticed the body.
And where's the body?
It's right down there on the creek bank.
He then points out the human remains. A young, light-complected black male, wearing only a pair of undershorts, blue in color.
He appeared to be in very good physical shape.
One eye is open, one eye is closed. That tells me that death came very quickly for this young man. Looking at him in the creek bed, I immediately started thinking about how could this have happened.
You guys mind rolling the body over for me?
There is no evidence of blood spatter. The average human body has 8 to 10 pints of blood. There'd be cast-off bleeding. There'd be pressure, dispersion of blood.
It was obvious that there had not been any blood that was in that immediate area.
This person bled out before he arrived at this location. He was left here, but he certainly didn't die here. He's been bludgeoned about the head with a pipe or a similar object made out of metal, hit several times and stabbed 24 times. One of these stab wounds goes through his heart and goes all the way to his spine. The stab wounds were in a very closely placed pattern in the body, which indicates a high-speed level of attack, almost a blitz attack.
There were knife wounds in the back, in the facial area, and also I noted there were defense wounds. So it appeared that our victim was fighting his attackers off.
It tells me that whoever did this was absolutely frantic when they were doing it. It doesn't tell me why they were frantic.
nor does it tell Kenda where this fatal attack took place. Until they can determine the location of the murder, Kenda and his team are flying blind.
We have the ending of this story. We don't have the beginning or the middle. Without a crime scene, we have no way to connect this person to any other group of people.
And so it's somewhat of a challenge. He was partially clothed, and we observed clothing next to his body.
I look at the shirt. There are no puncture wounds in the shirt. The pants are unclipped and unzipped. They've been removed in a normal way, which indicates to me that most likely he took them off before this attack occurred. The question is, why? Why did he take his clothes off? Is he being directed to get undressed at knife point?
Dad, take your clothes off!
Is this a sex crime? Is it rage? Is it fear? Or is it both? I have a great number of questions and I have absolutely no answers.
Kenda asks CSIs to collect fingerprints and run them through the CSPD database.
Did you find any ID?
No, there's no ID.
He has nothing in his possession that says who he is. What he does have is a piece of paper cut with scissors with a phone number, the same number written on those tear-off sheets.
162 dispatch. Run a number for me.
So we immediately took those numbers to the Major Crimes Unit and determined that numbers came back to a pager company, which was instrumental in helping us identify who the victim was.
Corey Allen Edge.
He's 20 years of age, and he is the person who purchased that pager only a month and a half earlier.
So who exactly was Mr. Edge?
One must decide who the victim is in any murder. It's very important to learn the dynamics of a victim's lifestyle, and generally the best source for that is family.
I was making a grilled cheese sandwich, and I heard this knock on the door. I went and answered the door, and it was two detectives.
Corey had a brother, Lamar, who was 14 at the time this occurred.
How you doing? I'm Detective Kenda.
How are you?
Does Corey Edge live here?
Yeah, he does. That's my big brother. Why? Is something wrong?
Is your mom here?
Yes.
When I told his mom that he had been killed, she was absolutely hysterical and was unable to continue talking with us.
Everything just froze. I was just at awe and shocked. I was like, couldn't nobody take my brother. He was a role model to me. He taught me that anything that I wanted to do, that I could do it.
Kenda wants to give the family a moment to grieve, but with every passing minute, catching Corey's killer becomes more and more difficult.
But I need to ask you a few questions in order to help you.
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit about Corey?
Oh, Corey was a great kid. He's a great athlete. He's health conscious.
He was a Golden Gloves boxer, and he was extremely talented. He'd won a number of events, and his coach believed he could become a professional boxer.
He was really nice with his hands.
He was very careful about his diet. He did not use drugs. He did not drink alcohol.
He had his whole life laid out for him. He's going to broadcasting school.
My brother always was into something positive. Corey was very goal-driven.
This was a kid who had some potential.
Can you think of anyone that might want to hurt him?
Oh, no. Everybody loved Corey. I had to even change the home phone number because so many people called him, and I made him take a pager.
Both Lamar and his mother said that Corey was very popular with young ladies. They were attracted to the fact that he was a nearly professional boxer. Lamar doesn't really know why someone would want to hurt Corey, but he thought it might have something to do with all the women he associated with.
Kenda wonders if Corey's reputation as a ladies' man might explain why he was found in his underwear.
What if he's undressed in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong female, and a husband or a boyfriend shows up.
What you doing with this dude?
What the f are you doing here?
Get your ass out of this bed, station. Let's go.
And is more than a little annoyed by this. That certainly is a possibility.
Is it possible he was with one of these girls last night?
Not to my knowledge. Last time I saw him was around 2:30.
So where did he go? I mean, why did you see him at 2 o'clock and not after?
He told me that he was going to his friends Jason and Daryl Sanchez's house.
They met playing basketball a few months ago. They live in an apartment close by Corey's mother's apartment. So that was important. It gives us another lead, another place to go. So then the question becomes, the Sanchez brothers, who are they? I'm really hopeful that they've got something to say that can put some glimmer of light into this darkness that I'm feeling about this case. We're investigating the murder of 20-year-old boxer Corey Edge, found dumped in a creek bed in North Cheyenne Canyon. We know that he was recently in the company of two brothers, Jason and Daryl Sanchez. They are obviously the beginning point of this investigation.
Mrs. Sanchez?
Yes?
I'm from the Colorado Springs Police Department. Are your sons home?
Daryl, Jason, get up here. Get up here.
What do you want?
Get up here.
After some coaxing, she was able to get both sons out.
19-year-old Daryl and 16-year-old Jason emerge from the basement.
What, Mom? We're in the middle of a game. What do you need? Hey, what's going on?
Would you guys have a seat?
Sure, yeah.
I want to talk to you about your friend Corey Edge.
They say, oh, absolutely. Corey came over yesterday afternoon.
Watched a movie pretty late last night. Fell asleep, you know.
Yeah, and about midnight, he got up and went out to the convenience store.
Yeah, and then when we woke up this morning, he was already gone.
They didn't expect Corey to not come back. And when he didn't come back, they became very worried that something bad had happened to Corey.
Corey was found dead in North Canyon Park. He was murdered.
What? Oh my God.
The news appears to hit the Sanchez brothers hard.
I knew it. I knew I should have called the police or something, but I didn't want to get Corey in trouble.
In every murder case, there's always that nagging feeling that there is a secret not yet known, that there's some part of this victim's life that we have yet to uncover. And it becomes a nagging question. What is that?
Kenda thinks back to Corey's mother and her complaint about phone calls. Why would Corey get so many calls that he would need a pager?
Do you have any idea why he would leave late at night?
They finally admit, unwillingly at first, that Corey sells crack cocaine. So you have an individual who's living a double life that's not easily seen. On the surface, he is an athlete. He's on his way to somewhere important. But underneath that facade, he's a drug dealer.
He was trying to pay to get through college.
They accompany him when he sells crack cocaine. His favorite place to do that is a convenience store, which is walking distance from their apartment.
According to both Daryl and Jason, Corey was new to the game.
He was making less than $800 a month selling drugs. Not exactly Pablo Escobar or anybody like that. Just somebody trying to survive.
He figured, well, I can't find a job. I'll try my bid at selling drugs. Corey knew that you can't sell drugs forever.
He was a handsome kid. He was making steps to move his life on. He had some skill physically. There were some people that looked up to him, and at the same time, he was dealing crack.
Corey had only been selling drugs for a month or two, but it was certainly long enough to establish a list of potential enemies. He had 152 pager calls on that pager. At a minimum, we have 152 suspects.
Not only does this revelation open a floodgate of new suspects, it explains the mysterious strips of paper found in Corey's pockets.
If you're in the drug business, you carry this piece of paper with you, and you pass that number out to potential customers.
Kenda asks the Sanchez brothers to walk him through the events of the previous day.
He came over, we hung out most of the day, played some basketball.
At approximately 7 to 8 p.m., Corey gets a page, and Daryl and Jason leave the residence. And they walk over 1 block, and they've made arrangements to make a deal.
We had to walk down to the convenience store.
Corey would actually meet his customers. Transactions would take place in a car.
How much you want? Come on, man.
It's 20.
Often carrying as much as $300, $400, $500, $600 in cash.
Yeah, I guess we don't know.
Yeah, we good?
Yeah,
Let's
come
go.
on.
Let's go.
According to Jason and Daryl, by 11:30, all 3 boys were back in their basement watching TV.
They say at 2:30 or so in the morning, everybody's asleep. Corey's pager goes off again. He asked them to go with him. They say, we're too tired to go with you this time. Go by yourself.
He got up and went down to the convenience store.
Yeah. We were asleep, and when we woke up, he wasn't here.
He never came back.
No. And then when I woke up this morning, his bag was here, and he was gone.
His bag's still here?
Yeah. No, I'll go get it for you if you want.
We'll come with you.
Okay.
We did look around in the basement area where both sons were living.
It looked normal, cluttered, and not exactly well kept, but normal.
Jason points Kenda in the direction of the gym bag. He begins to examine its contents.
It contains clothing that apparently would fit Corey Edge.
Do you think of anyone that might want to do this to Corey?
Whoever it was that was paging him at 2:30 in the morning would be my guess.
Their story is very consistent, and as a result, it's very believable. Jason and Daryl Jr. say no one person could take him. It had to be maybe more than 2 to be able to deal with him.
Come on.
Come on, you want to go?
Come on.
He was clearly willing and able to defend himself with his fists.
But Kenda knows that a solid left hook will only get you so far in a knife fight. And the fact that Corey was a relative novice in the cutthroat world of crack cocaine could have made him an easy target.
You good, man?
So then the question becomes, is it a disgruntled former customer, or is it strictly a robbery? What is known in the street as a drug rip. You call a known dealer, he shows up, you rob him of his drugs and his money, he resists, and you kill him. That all works with one problem. Why is he in his underwear?
Is it possible Corey's assailants stripped him down, hoping to get their hands on the rest of his stash?
Some of the patrol officers at the scene believed that he possibly had been tortured because of the amount of damage to the body.
Kenda pays a visit to the convenience store where Corey conducted his business.
How you doing? Colorado Springs Police? Can you tell me if you've ever seen this guy before?
Nah, never seen him.
You sure? We were told he comes here all the time, maybe hanging out in the parking lot?
We have clerks. They're not exactly too attentive as to what's going on. Never saw the Sanchez brothers, never saw anybody. Those people are in there every day, buying chips, buying candy, whatever. But nobody knows anybody. But you have to ask. Maybe you'll get lucky. I'm not lucky.
Thank you for your help.
We start checking to see how many other friends Corey might have had in the hope that somebody knows something.
Luckily for Kenda, little brother Lamar hung around Corey's friends and is able to refer the detective to those who knew Corey best.
We meet this kid named Andre Walker. He was a friend and associate of Corey's. He knew another guy named Jimmy Van. There was a falling out between Jimmy and Corey. Do serious falling outs lead to murder? Not usually, but they certainly could. What was interesting to me about Jimmy Van is he's a named individual. He's not some vague person passing in the night. Bad blood with the victim and some confrontations. Okay, a glimmer of hope. Great. Let's talk to Jimmy Van.
Kenda deploys the fugitive team to track down Jimmy and bring him to the station.
You hear footsteps behind you? You'll be hearing them shortly. Looking over your shoulder. Do you see me yet? Because I can see you. We have just managed to develop a solid suspect, an individual named Jimmy Van. He has an extensive criminal history. He's had confrontations with our victim. It's essential we talk to him immediately in an interrogation room.
When Jimmy Van enters the interview room, Kenda and his detective, David Moore, find themselves standing across from a lanky teenager, fresh out of high school.
Tell me how you know Corey Edge.
The guy's a jerk, has no respect for anyone.
Jimmy had explained that he'd known Corey since they were in middle school together, but this falling out he considered to be a serious one, that they were no longer friends.
Ever come to blows? You ever get in a fight with him?
Yeah, it did.
Why don't you walk me through that?
Yeah, we were hanging out drinking. You know, I started running my mouth a little bit.
So you probably think you're the man, huh? Well, what's your problem, man?
And the guy freaks out and just starts beating me down in front of everybody.
What's wrong with you, bitch? Man, I ain't afraid of you, man. Come on, come on. We'll talk now.
Jimmy is embarrassed that Corey slapped him silly during the course of this confrontation in front of other people. When someone is beaten by someone in the street in front of their friends, it can produce an enormous level of hate. Could that be a motive? Yeah, it could.
According to Jimmy, he was so angry at Corey, he openly talked about wanting him dead.
We certainly know why others believe he could be responsible for this, because he's threatened him, he's told people somebody ought to kill him.
I'm gonna cut to the chase, Jimmy. Corey Edge is dead. Word on the street is you had something to do with it.
What?
His response is the common response. People on the street say a lot of things.
You know anything about that?
No, absolutely not.
You wouldn't lie to me, would you?
No, sir. I didn't like him, but never that, never.
Jimmy seems to be telling the truth, but Detective Moore sees a more obvious reason to believe him.
My impression was Jimmy Van was not a person that could take Corey Edge. It truly would have taken a few people to attack Corey.
Where were you last night?
I was in Denver with my friends.
We check his alibis. We confirm all of it. He had nothing to do with this, other than the fact he disliked the victim, which is not against the law. So our first real person that we can lay our hands on goes up in smoke. Corey is still a victim, and we're no closer to the person that killed him than when we found him in Cheyenne Canyon.
The investigation is losing steam, but the media attention is just heating up. Over the next few days, Kenda's office is flooded with a wave of anonymous tips.
Kenda.
When homicide investigation does not produce an arrest within a day or two, then the rumor mill begins, and it doesn't stop.
Unfortunately, most of the leads are worthless.
People always believe rumors. They rarely believe the facts.
But one of them does stand out.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, what do you got for us?
We get one guy who says that a guy named Barney Davis and a buddy of his named Rat, they have an apartment. There is blood everywhere in this apartment. They knew the victim. They must have killed him. These individuals have long, glorious criminal records. We confront them.
You know Corey Edge?
Yeah, I know Corey.
Mind if we come in and look around?
Be my guest.
We inspect this apartment. There is a cage on a table in the main room containing a live rat. Now, he has a human associate named Rat. Maybe this is his pet. Who knows? But you look at that and you think, well, that's pretty bizarre, isn't it?
Go ahead and have a seat. The reason why we're here is Corey Edge is dead.
Glancing around the room, Kenda spots a number of reddish-brown stains on the carpet.
Blood, after it's been there for a period of time, will turn from red or crimson in color to a coppery brown when it's dried. So you look at that and you think, that could be blood.
Is this blood on the carpet?
No, it ain't blood, man. We don't have nothing to do with this, man. We didn't kill anybody, man.
No.
If you're gonna lie to me, you better be exceptionally good at it, because I am exceptionally good at knowing when you are.
Come in. Go ahead and run your test.
Kenda has the forensic team run a Kastle-Meyer test, in which a chemical known as phenolphthalein is applied to the stained area. If the sample turns bright pink, it means blood is present.
That's one of the tests you can perform. It'll tell you immediately if it's human blood. It'll tell you if it's animal blood. It'll tell you if it isn't blood. Our only concern is it human blood? Does it belong to Corey Edge? I've just seen a piece of evidence that I think is going to be big. The CSI team and I are looking around the apartment of drug dealer Barney Davis and his associate Rat. We're looking for blood evidence.
When blood evidence is being analyzed, one of the things we look at is the quantity. The amount of blood can give you some hints.
If the carpet stains found in Barney and Rat's apartment prove to be human blood, Kenda may have found his crime scene.
It's negative.
Had no reaction at all to the test. No reaction, it's not blood. So our story, which looks so good, now looks so bad. We're going along, spinning our wheels, getting madder by the minute, and getting nowhere at all.
But just when Kenda's prospects of solving the case seem dimmest, a new lead surfaces from an unlikely source.
Kenda, this is dispatch.
Go for Kenda.
We have Jimmy Stevenson.
Where is he right now?
He's in custody at county jail.
10-4. Put him in an internal room and we'll be right there.
Good news?
We're about to find out.
Jimmy Stevenson indicated he had information on the Corey Edge homicide.
Jimmy Stevenson has recently been charged with breaking and entering. In custody on the B&E Rat, Jimmy appears ready to play ball.
Because he knows he's a criminal. He understands that police respond to people who say they have information about a murder.
Within the hour, Kenda is staring across the interrogation table at Jimmy Stevenson.
Jimmy is your typical arrogant criminal who thinks that he has the keys to the kingdom in his possession.
I know who did it. But look, you're gonna do right by me, all right? Either I get a deal or you don't get any information.
You better tell me what you know or I'm gone in the next 10 seconds. And you're going to jail for burglary, period, the end.
Corey, right, he owed this dude like $3,000, all right, for a stash that he bought off.
Oh, yeah? That doesn't ring true at all with me. Corey's not a $3,000 kind of guy. Who's the guy?
Big Daddy.
You've been reading a lot of comic books, Jimmy? Is that where you came up with that name, Big Daddy?
He's a drug dealer. It's Big Daddy.
And he hired these two guys named Pete and Scott.
And Scott and Pete's last names?
I mean, they're hitmen, Pete and Scott.
It was a contract. They picked Corey up at the convenience store in a brown Chevy.
Told you not to mess with Big Daddy. What the f you talking about?
I was there when they did it. Oh, yeah? You were there. Yeah, I watched him. You watched him do what? They forced him into the car at gunpoint. At gunpoint. They each had a gun?
They took him, drove him somewhere, killed him, and dumped the body. Right? You know, so what? What, do I get my deal or what?
Absolutely not. What do you think happened here, Jimmy? They threw their guns away and got out a knife? It's a completely unbelievable, fantastic story. Contract killings of drug people happen in the movies. What he wants is out of jail.
You're going to jail for burglary.
Hey, no, I gave both of y'all all the information you could have wanted. Everything. What? Nah, this is bull. Hey.
Goodbye, Jimmy. The longer an investigation continues without result, the less chance there becomes of you ever resolving it. It doesn't matter to me what complications there were in Corey's personal life or his engagement in criminal activity. That matters not. What matters is his life was violently taken. I'm sitting in my office and it's like 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm thinking, if he's not tortured, if he's not with a girl, maybe he's in his underwear because he's in bed.
Kenda wonders if Jimmy Stevenson isn't the only one who's been feeding him bad information.
He gets undressed and he goes to bed. Where does he do that? He does that in Sanchez's basement with his two buddies. What if something goes wrong? And somebody in that house kills him and dumps him in the park. That made sense to me. We're looking for multiple offenders here because it would take more than one to get control of him.
Excuse me, sir.
Authorities canvassed the surrounding complex, hoping that a neighbor saw something the night of the crime.
A woman who lives next door says that she remembers seeing something.
I got up early, like 5 or 5:30 in the morning, and all three of them, the two sons and the father, were out there carrying this big tarp.
Can you describe it at all?
Couldn't really tell from my window.
Did you happen to see what they did with it?
Looks like they were carrying it to their car, from what I can tell.
What if what they're carrying out is Corey Edge? It's circumstantial evidence. It's an indicator. But it fits with my theory of underwear. Now I'm starting to like this.
Kenda and Moore head over to have another talk with the Sanchez family.
Mr. Sanchez, is it possible we come in to talk to you and your boys again?
No, my boys already told you everything they had to say.
Well, we received some new information. It might be important for us to talk to them about.
No, I told you can't come in. I don't have anything to say.
So I said, okay, Mr. Sanchez, I will honor your wishes. But I want you to remember something. Maybe you should even write this down. I don't forgive, and I don't forget.
Less than 24 hours later, Kenda is back at the Sanchez residence.
I told you we had nothing to say. Mr. Sanchez, we have a warrant to search the place. Step aside.
A search warrant looking for bloodstains.
Luminol is used when there is a suspicion that blood has been shed in a particular area, but you can't see it with the naked eye. It can give you a lot more information about what kind of altercation may have occurred.
It causes the human blood trace to fluoresce in ultraviolet light, so it literally glows yellow.
Detectives spray luminol on every surface in the Sanchez basement.
I'm expecting this room to light up enough for me to read a newspaper in.
So what do we got?
We've got nothing. We've saturated the place with luminol, and hey, hit that light for me. I mean, there's literally nothing. The place is clean.
Nothing anywhere.
Nothing.
I was in shock. What do you mean there's no blood?
Kenda and his team have no choice but to leave.
We had no hard evidence, no physical evidence, no statements, no indication of the presence of a crime scene in their house.
The lack of blood evidence suggests the Sanchez brothers had nothing to do with Corey Edge's murder, but Kenda's gut still tells him otherwise.
My initial thought was that some members of this family, or maybe all of them together, killed Corey Edge. Everyone thought I was a little crazy at that point about it.
The case goes cold for 5 whole years. But Kenda hasn't forgotten about Corey Edge.
It languishes until a gift from God falls out of the sky.
It starts when CSPD responds to an assault call between 2 brothers. Kenda learns that the wounded man is Daryl Sanchez Sr., father of Jason and Daryl Jr.
Daryl Sr. has a brother whose name is Ralph. Ralph Sanchez is an ex-convict. He stabs Daryl in the chest and damn near kills him during a family disturbance. He gets arrested for first-degree assault and attempted murder.
It's a vicious crime, but it presents Kenda with an opportunity to reopen a case that haunts him.
This is the magic moment I've been waiting for. When you've run out of ideas, you're left with waiting for someone's knee to touch the ground. And when that report came forward and came across my desk that Ralph Sanchez had stabbed Daryl Sanchez Sr., my first thought was there is a God, and he has stepped in and provided me with an opportunity. We go see Ralph.
Ralph was about to be charged with a pretty serious assault with a deadly weapon on Daryl Sr. The motivation for coming forward seemed logical.
Ralphie, seems to be you're in like a spot of trouble here.
Your brother might not survive those injuries. And the reason you're here is because Daryl was involved in a murder about 5 years ago of a guy named Corey Edge.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you do, Ralph. You are blood to these people.
Well, Daryl already told us some stuff about this murder.
My brother told you that? Man.
You already have a criminal record. You're gonna go down for this. You're gonna go down even harder if you don't give me the information you have about this murder.
He's getting really agitated, and he says, "You're asking me to give up my family." And I said, "Ralph, your family is the reason why you're sitting here, in case you haven't noticed."
Well, listen, any information that you have about the murder might take precedence over the situation you're in right now.
We were willing to give him a sentence concession, meaning that he would have to plead guilty, but he could stay out of prison.
Now tell me exactly what happened.
He told me his boys killed that guy, Corey Edge. Him and his wife went to the basement, and his body was on the stairs, and there was blood everywhere.
Well, I appreciate your cooperation.
There's going to be a judgment day, and it happens to be today. 5 years of grief and 5 years of frustration, 5 years of anger go away. I felt very good.
Kenda knows who killed Corey Edge, but he still needs to know how and why. With 5 years gone by, tracking down the Sanchez brothers proves to be difficult. Turns out, they both moved to California shortly after the crime. Kenda eventually locates Daryl Jr., and with the help of authorities in California, he is extradited back to Colorado.
Tell me exactly what happened on December 5th, 1989.
I was doing a lot of crack back then with Corey Edge. He was staying at my house, and it was like late at night, and I really wanted some.
When Corey decided to go to bed, our man Daryl Jr. wanted more crack. He waited for Corey to fall asleep. And he tried to take more crack out of the pocket of his pants.
Yo, what the? Nothing!
Corey woke up and pulled a gun on him.
What are you doing, man?
He tried to shoot me, but it jammed, and so I got scared. There was a pipe lying around, so I grabbed this pipe and I started, hitting him with the pipe. But he was a strong dude. He didn't even faze me. But he kept coming at me and he started punching me.
Daryl Jr. claims that with Corey allegedly raining punches down on him, his brother Jason came to his rescue.
Hey! Get off of him!
Jason got a knife and repeatedly stabbed Corey. Corey tried to go up the stairs and collapsed on the staircase, and he died.
According to Daryl Jr., the commotion woke the boy's parents, who came downstairs just in time to see Corey take his last breath.
Daryl Sr. tells the boys that he's going to call the police.
No! You can't call the police, Dad. You do not know who he runs with. They'll kill Jason, they'll kill me, they'll kill you guys. Seriously, we cannot tell anybody about this.
They talk this over, Mom included, and they decide they're going to conceal the death. What made this case unusual is that you have a family that decides to get involved in a murder. Mom, Dad, and 2 kids. That is rare. They carried the body off, dumped it in Cheyenne Canyon, dumped his clothes along with it.
Having recently begun working as a maintenance man, Daryl Jr. had an idea how they could rid the scene of any evidence.
There were over 20 stab wounds, and so it would have been a tremendous amount of blood.
They used bleach and paint. Bleach destroys human blood, and they used 5 gallons of it. They pulled up tile in the floor because they thought some blood had leaked under the tiles in a certain area and replaced them.
Very few crime scenes are cleaned to the level that the Sanchez apartment had been cleaned.
So we wind up arresting the Sanchez family for killing this kid. Who actually killed him? I think they all participated. Probably 2 people, but there are 4 in question.
At trial, Jason and Daryl Jr. are convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 22 years. Father Daryl Sr. and Mother Tani receive probationary sentences of 6 and 4 years, respectively.
They would never be the same, not after they conspired like this. Dark secrets are extremely destructive.
But even with the killers behind bars, the truth about what really happened the night Corey Edge died remains a mystery.
I don't think Corey ever pulled a gun. I think he got up, was prepared to defend himself when he got whacked in his skull with a pipe.
The tragedy of seeing any young person killed is that you don't know what they were going to grow up to be.
I think Corey missed out on having a chance to get married, have children, complete at least one of those goals.
I'm just so sad for Corey Edge because I think he may have turned into a person that could have been a decent, if not even creative part of society.
Corey Edge was a young man who had dreams, had hopes, wasn't exactly certain how to accomplish them, was trying to survive in a difficult world, and selected exactly the wrong people to survive with. Corey believed he could handle himself. He found out he couldn't against 2 people in the dark in the middle of the night.
They still swear they can hear it in the humidity, like the night itself never stopped talking, one sharp ring slicing through the thick Florida air, a payphone screaming at 2:17 a.m., and nobody on the other end willing to say a name. Not then. Not ever. Just breathing. Slow. Controlled. Like someone counting seconds. Like someone listening for footsteps. Like someone deciding whether the next sound this town would hear would be a confession or another disappearance. Florida, 1974. The kind of summer that sticks to your skin and refuses to let go. Salt in your hair. Neon in your eyes. The coastline glittering like a promise, the back roads yawning like a threat. In a small town pressed between tourist postcard beaches and mosquito-thick marshland, people kept their doors unlocked and their secrets locked tight. The local paper ran sunny headlines, boat shows, high school football, a new diner opening on Route A1A, until one morning it didn't. One morning, the headline didn't smile. One morning, the ink looked like a bruise. Florida 1974 cold case solved, it would claim years later, in a bold typeface meant to end a nightmare. But in the beginning, there was no solved. There was only missing. Only last seen. Only if you know anything. Only a photo pinned behind the front desk at the sheriff's office, corners curling, staring straight into the future as if they already knew it wouldn't answer back. Her name was Marlene Kessler. 22. A waitress at the Pelican Palms Motor Lodge, the kind of place with a kidney-shaped pool, an ice machine that rattled like a cough, and rooms rented by sunburned couples who didn't ask questions and didn't want answers. Marlene had the face of someone who could talk her way out of trouble, and the posture of someone who had learned not to try. She wore her hair tied back at work, but in her friends' photos it fell loose, dark and glossy, catching light like wet sand. She laughed with her whole mouth. She loved cheap perfume. She carried a small spiral notebook in her purse, filled with grocery lists and phone numbers and tiny, sharp observations about strangers, little lines, little sketches, little instincts that made her friends joke she should have been a detective. On Friday, August 9th, she clocked out at 11:43 p.m. The time was written in her manager's neat block letters, a simple fact that would later become a knife. She wiped down her station, refilled ketchup bottles, and told the cook she'd see him tomorrow. She stepped out into a parking lot lit by buzzing lamps and the faint glow of the highway beyond the palms. The air was warm enough to feel alive. The ocean was close enough to smell, but not close enough to protect her. She walked to her car, a pale yellow Ford Maverick with a cracked taillight, and she never drove it home. They found the Maverick the next afternoon, parked in a sandy pull-off near the mangroves, half hidden by sea-grape bushes. The driver's door was shut, but not locked. The keys were gone. On the passenger seat, her purse sat upright like it had been placed carefully, not tossed. Cash still inside. Lipstick. The spiral notebook. No sign of a struggle in the sand, no torn fabric, no drag marks leading to the trees. Just a single high heel lying on its side a few feet away, as if it had been dropped mid-step. As if she'd been interrupted by something she couldn't ignore. As if she'd been told, quietly, to come along. The first deputies on scene said the place looked too tidy. That was the phrase. Too tidy. And in a town like this, tidy was suspicious. Tidy meant staged. Tidy meant someone had time. The sheriff, Harold Dempsey, was a thick-shouldered man with a tobacco voice and a reputation for solving problems with presence more than precision. He put out a bulletin, called in volunteers, organized search parties with flashlights and bloodhounds, and pushed men into the brush where the mosquitoes ate them alive. They searched the mangroves until their arms were striped with cuts. They dragged canals where alligators floated like logs and logs floated like bodies. They walked the beach at dawn, when the tide pulled secrets back out and the gulls screamed like witnesses. Nothing. Just heat. Just insects. Just the steady, heartless rhythm of waves. Then the phone call. It came into the sheriff's office at 2:17 a.m. on Sunday morning, 48 hours after Marlene vanished. The dispatcher picked up, expecting a drunk or a domestic or a stray dog complaint. Instead, silence, then breathing, then a man's voice, low, clipped, and careful, like he was reading from a script he'd rehearsed. "You're looking in the wrong water," he said. The dispatcher froze. "Who is this?" A pause, a soft click like a tongue against teeth. "Tell Dempsey," the voice continued, "she didn't drown. She didn't run. Where is she?" Another pause. The line filled with static, the kind of crackle that made the hairs on your arms lift. Then, "Stop digging where you're told to dig." And the call ended. No trace. No callback number. Just the timestamp, the lingering ring in the dispatcher's ear, and a sentence that would turn into a fever in the town's bloodstream. "You're looking in the wrong water." That line went everywhere. It moved faster than the deputies. Faster than the patrol cars. It slipped into church pews and grocery aisles and barbershops. It crawled through screen porches at night and settled in the corners like mold. Some people said it was Marlene, forced to speak. Others said it was a prank. Others said it was the killer playing games, because games were easier than guilt. The motel staff became suspects by proximity. The cook, who'd argued with her over a burnt order. The manager, who'd given her a ride once when her car wouldn't start. A traveling salesman who'd checked in that night, signing the ledger with a shaky hand and leaving at dawn. A local fisherman with a record for assault who'd been seen drinking at the bar near closing time. Each name became a headline in someone's mind. Each rumor was a match tossed into dry grass. Marlene's mother, Evelyn, sat in the sheriff's waiting room for hours at a time, hands folded in her lap so tightly her knuckles went pale. She didn't cry in public. Not at first. She stared. She listened. She asked the same question over and over in a voice that never rose, never broke. "What are you doing next?" Like she could keep her daughter alive by keeping the investigation moving. Like momentum was a lifeline. Marlene's friends did their own searching. They drove the back roads at night, headlights sweeping over ditches and palmetto thickets. They posted flyers on telephone poles and laundromat corkboards. They called hospitals. They called morgues. They called strangers who claimed to have seen her at a gas station in Daytona, in a bus depot in Jacksonville, in the arms of a man with a beard and a tattoo of a snake. Every tip led to a dead end. Every lead turned into a lie. And the longer she stayed missing, the more the town began to split into factions, those who believed she was alive somewhere, and those who had already started speaking about her in the past tense. Then came the weirdest detail, the one that didn't fit, the one that made even hardened deputies exchange looks. The spiral notebook. Buried between grocery lists and phone numbers was a page filled with handwriting that didn't match Marlene's. Not cursive. Not her quick, slanted style. This was blocky, deliberate. And it wasn't a message of love or rage. It was a list. 12:05, blue pickup, dented tailgate. 12:19, man with hat, watching mirror. 12:41, room 17, no luggage. 1:03, phone booth, 2 calls, no coins. It read like surveillance. Like someone had been observing the motel, timing movements, cataloging details. Or like Marlene had been documenting something that made her nervous enough to write it down. The deputies asked her co-workers if they recognized the writing. Nobody did. The page felt like a warning that arrived too late. Sheriff Dempsey held the notebook like it might burn him. "When did she write this?" he asked. Evelyn didn't answer. She took the notebook and traced the ink with her fingertip, as if she could read her daughter's fear by touch. She was smart, she said, flat and deadly. She noticed things. In the days that followed, the investigation lurched forward and backward like a car stuck in sand. The sheriff's office got flooded with tips, some useful, most poisonous. A waitress claimed Marlene had mentioned a guy who wouldn't stop staring. A motel guest said he heard a woman's laugh in the parking lot around midnight, then a muffled shout, then a car door closing. A teenager on a bike swore he saw a yellow Maverick parked by the mangroves earlier than the deputies believed, meaning the timeline might be wrong, meaning everything might be wrong. They canvassed the highway for the blue pickup. Dozens of them existed. Florida was full of blue pickups. They checked room 17 records, occupied by a man named Kenneth Rourke, address in Georgia, paid cash, left no forwarding information. The name was common enough to be useless, rare enough to sound like it belonged in a police report. They ran it anyway. Nothing came back that mattered. No warrants. No known history. A ghost with a receipt. The phone booth mentioned in the notebook sat outside a convenience store 2 miles from the motel. When deputies went there, the clerk shrugged. "People use it," he said. "Tourists, drunks, kids. Everybody calls somebody." But when they asked about 2 calls, no coins, his face tightened. He remembered that. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was odd. He'd watched a man in a brimmed hat lift the receiver, talk briefly, hang up, then do it again, quick, clipped, like he was checking in. No coins. No dialing. Like the calls were incoming. Like the phone was waiting for him. The clerk described him, mid-30s, lean, tan, a calmness that didn't belong in a place that smelled like beer and motor oil. The clerk couldn't remember the man's eyes, only the way he stood, perfectly still, as if he didn't want the world to notice he was there. That kind of stillness doesn't come from shyness. It comes from control. And then, another jolt, another spike in the town's pulse, someone found something in the marsh. A child, walking with his father near a drainage canal, spotted a glint in the mud. The father thought it was trash. It wasn't. It was a thin gold chain, tangled with reeds, the clasp still closed. Evelyn identified it without hesitation. It was Marlene's. She wore it every day. A tiny pendant shaped like a starfish. A souvenir from a childhood beach trip, the kind of cheap charm that becomes priceless because it survives everything until it doesn't. The canal was dragged for hours. The water was black and slow. Deputies pulled up old tires, rusted cans, a broken cooler, a dead raccoon, and nothing else. No clothing. No shoes. No body. Just the chain, like a breadcrumb meant to lead nowhere. That night, the town didn't sleep. Porch lights stayed on. Radios murmured in kitchens. The ocean kept breathing, steady and indifferent. Somewhere, A man had made a phone call and told them they were looking in the wrong water, and now they had a piece of Marlene in the water anyway, as if someone wanted them to chase their tails. As if someone wanted the search to exhaust itself. As if someone understood that time was a weapon, and all he had to do was wait. Evelyn went back to the sheriff's office after midnight, carrying the chain in a small plastic evidence bag like it was a heart. She didn't beg. She didn't threaten. She simply placed it on Dempsey's desk and stared at him until he looked away first. The fluorescent lights made everything look sick. The fan on the ceiling clicked like a countdown. "We're doing everything we can," Dempsey said, voice rough, impatient with his own helplessness. Evelyn leaned forward. "No," she said. "You're doing what you know how to do. That's not the same." Outside, the air pressed down like a hand. In the dark, the palms swayed. The highway whispered with passing tires. Somewhere out there, someone had taken a young woman who noticed too much, wrote it down, and vanished anyway. And the most terrifying part wasn't the silence from the swamp or the blank stares from suspects or the lies woven into every tip, it was the feeling that the case already had its shape, already had its ending, and the only thing the town didn't know was how long it would take to admit it. Because in Florida, 1974, you could lose someone in plain sight. You could make a person disappear between a motel parking lot and a front door. You could leave behind a shoe, a chain, a notebook full of strange timing marks, and a phone call that sounded like a warning. And the next morning, the sun would rise anyway, bright and brutal, lighting up a community that smiled for tourists while its own fear grew teeth in the shadows, waiting for the next ring of that phone, waiting for the next name to become a headline, waiting for the moment the word, solved, would finally mean something or prove, forever, that it never would. By Monday morning the town wore the case like a fresh bruise, tender and angry, and the first thing people did when they stepped out of their houses wasn't breathe the sea air or check the weather, it was scan the street, scan the hedges, scan the faces in passing cars, because now the fear had a name and the name was Marlene Kessler and the space where she should have been was loud enough to drown out everything else. The sheriff's office started counting time in tips, in rumors, in cigarette butts crushed into the linoleum by men who pretended not to shake, and every hour that passed without a body turned the case into something worse than murder, something elastic and cruel, something that could stretch forever. The local radio station broke format, pushed aside beach music and ads for bait shops, and ran the same urgent bulletin over and over, young woman missing, last seen near the Pelican Palms, call if you know anything, do not approach, stay vigilant, lock your doors, and the words sounded like they belonged in a city, not here, not in this sun-bleached pocket of Florida where strangers were supposed to be tourists and danger was supposed to be a rip current, not a man with a plan. Sheriff Dempsey leaned on the old playbook, check alibis, shake the drunks, lean on the creeps, sweep the roads, search the water again even if someone told you not to, because when you don't have the killer, you try to have the territory. He put deputies on the highway, stopping blue pickups until the drivers started screaming about their rights, and each stop only made the town more restless, because every innocent man pulled over meant the guilty one was still out there, still moving, still calm. The motel became a hive of suspicion, every room number sounded like a crime scene, every guest was a potential headline. And in the center of it all sat that ledger, thick with names written in cheap ink, a register of transient lives passing through like clouds, and somewhere in that book, between a honeymoon couple and a traveling salesman, sat Kenneth Rourke, room 17, cash payment, checked out early, and no forwarding address, just a line of pen that might as well have been a knife. They found the cleaning lady who'd serviced room 17 the morning after Marlene disappeared. Her name was Gloria, and she spoke fast like she was trying to outrun her own memory. She told them the room was almost spotless, sheets stripped and folded, towels stacked, trash emptied, the kind of neatness that didn't match a man who'd paid cash and left at dawn. But there was one detail she couldn't shake, the bathroom mirror had been wiped so clean it looked new, except for one faint smear at the bottom corner, a cloudy thumbprint that wouldn't come off with Windex, the kind of mark left by someone gripping the glass while leaning in close. She said she'd looked at it too long and felt cold, even in the Florida heat. Like someone was standing behind me, she whispered. Dempsey wrote it down anyway, because at that point they wrote down everything, even ghosts. They tried to trace Rourke through the cash. The bills he used were ordinary, no recorded serial numbers, No bank straps, just money that had been in circulation long enough to smell like hundreds of pockets. The motel's owner, a man who cared more about occupancy rates than morality, shrugged and said people paid cash all the time. No paper trail, he added, like it was a benefit, like it was what made Florida Florida. The deputies took his shrug as an insult and left with nothing but the ledger, and the ledger gave them nothing but names that dissolved under pressure. Marlene's notebook became the center of gravity. Investigators photocopied the pages until the ink grew faint, passed copies around like contraband. Everyone stared at the list, trying to see a pattern that would crack the case open. Times. Vehicles. A man watching the mirror. 2 calls, no coins. The more they stared, the more it looked like a schedule, like choreography, like someone rehearsing a routine. Was it Marlene recording suspicious activity, or was it someone else using her notebook as a checklist? That question was poison, because either answer was terrifying. If she wrote it, she saw danger coming and still couldn't escape. If someone else wrote it, they were close enough to her to touch her purse, close enough to use her own things, close enough to enjoy the intimacy of it. A deputy named Roy Hatcher, young, sharp-eyed, not yet worn down into laziness, started mapping the times on a board, pushing pins into a county map like he was building a trap. He marked 12:05, 12:19, 12:41, 1:03, and then he compared it to the motel's layout, the parking lot lights, the sight lines from the diner windows, the angle of the office mirror behind the front desk. The man with hat, watching mirror, line kept bothering him. People didn't watch mirrors unless they wanted to see who was behind them without turning around. Mirrors were for cowards, or professionals. Roy asked the waitress who worked the late shift with Marlene if she'd noticed anyone unusual. The waitress hesitated, then said yes, there'd been a man at the counter, hat pulled low, nursing coffee like it was medicine, eyes flicking up to the mirror behind the bar every few seconds. He didn't look at me, she said. He looked past me. Roy wrote that down. He didn't tell Dempsey right away. He didn't want it dismissed as nothing. He wanted to bring it like a weapon. Meanwhile, the town press went feral. The local paper printed Marlene's photo again and again until the smile became a symbol. Television crews from bigger cities started sniffing around, hungry for tragedy with palm trees in the background. They filmed the motel sign, the mangroves, the canal, and they asked the same questions on camera with bright, predatory voices. Was she kidnapped? Was she murdered? Was it a serial killer? Why hasn't the sheriff made an arrest? And every time those questions aired, people felt the ground tilt a little more, because the case was no longer just theirs, it was being consumed by outsiders, turned into spectacle, turned into a story that didn't care about truth so long as it had suspense. Then the threats started. Not loud threats. Not a man kicking down doors. The threats were quiet. They arrived in the mail like sickness. Evelyn Kessler got the first one, a plain envelope with no return address, postmarked from a neighboring town. Inside was a single strip of newsprint cut from the paper, Marlene's face, her name, missing, and beneath it, in block letters that matched the strange notebook page, 3 words, "Stop asking questions." No signature. No explanation. Just a command, as cold as the bottom of a canal. Evelyn took it straight to the sheriff. Dempsey looked at it, jaw tightening. Probably some sick kid, he muttered, because admitting it might be the killer meant admitting the killer was close enough to touch the family, and Dempsey hated the feeling of being touched by someone he couldn't hit back. Evelyn didn't buy his comfort. She stared at him the way she stared at everyone now, like she was trying to see the lie behind the face. Kids don't type like this, she said. Kids don't mail warnings. Dempsey didn't answer. He folded the envelope into an evidence bag like it was fragile, like it could cut him. Roy Hatcher compared the letter to the notebook writing. The shapes were similar. The pressure marks were similar. The letters had the same blunt confidence. But handwriting analysis in 1974 was half science, half superstition, and certainty was rare. Still, Roy felt it in his bones, this wasn't random. This was the same hand, the same mind, the same careful, disciplined presence. A man who liked lists. A man who liked instructions. A man who treated people like items to be moved. The second threat went to the radio station. The DJ opened it live on air, expecting a sympathetic note, maybe a tip. Instead he pulled out a photograph, grainy, black and white, taken from a distance. It showed the payphone outside the convenience store. Standing beside it was a man in a brimmed hat, face turned away. On the back, written in the same blocky hand, "You heard me." The DJ went silent. The town went silent with him. Somewhere, the killer was listening. That photo detonated the case. It meant he'd been there. It meant he knew the phone booth mattered. It meant he was close enough to take pictures, develop film, cut through the fear like a knife, and drop the proof into the town's lap. It also meant something else, something that chilled Roy more than the threats. Whoever sent the photo had resources. Patience. A dark sense of timing. He wasn't panicking. He was performing. Dempsey called in state investigators. He hated doing it. It felt like admitting weakness. But the case was slipping, the town was boiling, and now there was a phantom photographer haunting their evidence. State agents arrived in crisp shirts and sharper attitudes, bringing their own theories, their own egos. They walked into the sheriff's office like it belonged to them, asked for files, asked for access, asked why the scene near the mangroves wasn't sealed longer, asked why the Maverick hadn't been dusted immediately, asked why they didn't have a clean chain of custody on the notebook. Dempsey bristled. Roy watched the clash and felt sick, because he knew what the killer thrived on: friction. Delay. Mistakes. They revisited the Maverick. Dusting revealed partial prints, smudged, overlapping, hard to separate from the dozens of hands that had touched the car, Marlene's, co-workers, friends, maybe the killer's. The trunk had been opened at some point, and inside they found sand, damp and dark, mixed with tiny fragments of vegetation, mangrove leaf bits, salt-crusted stems, suggesting the car had been there longer than they thought, or had been driven through similar terrain. A state agent scraped a sample into a bag like it was gold. Roy wondered how many days too late it was. They also revisited the canal where the chain was found. This time they brought divers with better gear, long poles, drag hooks, floodlights. They searched at night when the water reflected the moon like shattered glass. The divers came up shaking, faces pale, because canals were not oceans, canals were traps, narrow and blind, full of things that brushed against you in the dark. They found more debris. They found a rusted knife with no handle. They found a child's sandal. They found a wallet with no ID. The canal kept its secrets. The killer's voice, "You're looking in the wrong water," echoed in everyone's heads like a taunt. Marlene's friends started turning on each other. One swore she'd seen Marlene leave the diner with a man she didn't recognize. Another insisted Marlene would never leave willingly. Arguments erupted in parking lots, at kitchen tables, outside the motel, because grief makes people hungry for someone to blame, and blame is easier than uncertainty. The community's innocence cracked. Doors locked now. Curtains stayed drawn. Men who used to wave at passing cars now stared at them with suspicion, cataloging dents in tailgates, scanning for brimmed hats, scanning mirrors. Roy Hatcher finally brought his theory to Dempsey. He laid the photocopied notebook page on the desk beside the threatening letter and the photo. He pointed at the Times. He pointed at watching mirror. He described the man at the counter, hat low, eyes flicking to the mirror like he was monitoring the room. "He's using reflections," Roy said, voice tight. "He doesn't want to be seen looking. He wants to see without being caught. He's methodical. He's not local, maybe. Or he's local enough to blend. But he's controlled." Dempsey exhaled hard, annoyed at the word controlled, because it suggested the sheriff wasn't. "You got a name?" he asked. Roy hated that question. It was always about names, like naming the monster made it real enough to shoot. "Not yet," he admitted. "But room 17, Rourke, that's not right. The way that room was cleaned. The mirror smear. The cash. The early checkout. And the phone booth. He's circling the motel." He's using it as a stage. Dempsey stared at the board Roy had assembled, pins and lines and scribbled notes. For a moment, just a moment, Roy saw something like fear in the sheriff's eyes, not fear of the killer, but fear of failure, fear of being remembered as the man who let a young woman vanish and never brought her home. Dempsey rubbed his jaw. "Bring me something solid," he growled. "Not instincts." Roy left the office with his stomach burning. Outside, the sky was a violent blue, the kind of bright that felt indecent. Tourists still came. Kids still rode bikes. The ocean still glittered. And beneath it all, the case spread like oil. That evening, a third message arrived, not to the family, not to the press, but to the sheriff himself. It was slid under the station door between shifts, no one seeing who did it. Inside was a single page of lined paper. No envelope. No fingerprints. Just words, block letters, surgical and calm. "She noticed you. She wrote you down." That was her mistake. Now the case wasn't only about Marlene. Now it was about humiliation. Now it was about a killer who wanted credit without consequence, who wanted the town to know he was smarter, quieter, untouchable. Dempsey crumpled the paper in his fist and then smoothed it back out, because even rage had to become evidence. Roy watched him, and in that moment he understood something sick and simple: the killer wasn't hiding from the investigation. The killer was inside it, shaping it, feeding it, steering it toward exhaustion. And then, just as the town began to think the worst could not get worse, a storm rolled in from the Atlantic, thick clouds piling like bruises on the horizon, wind rattling the palms, rain hammering the roads, and the search zones turned to mud, the canals rose, the mangroves flooded, and whatever fragile traces existed out there, footprints, fibers, tire impressions, were washed clean, erased by weather that didn't care about justice. The storm sounded like static on an open phone line, like a long hiss of interference, and somewhere in the noise, in the gusts and the rain, people thought of that call at 2:17 a.m., the breathing, the careful voice, the certainty of it, and they wondered if the storm was just nature or if, in a town now trained to see patterns everywhere, it felt like another warning: time is on my side. When the rain finally eased, the sun returned like nothing had happened, and the community looked around at the soaked streets, the fallen branches, the puddles reflecting empty skies, and felt the cold case future settling in, heavy and inevitable, because the killer had done the one thing that makes a mystery immortal: he had left just enough behind to keep hope alive, and just enough missing to keep the wound open, and Marlene Kessler remained a name on flyers, a face on newsprint, chain in an evidence bag, a single high heel in a property room, and a notebook page filled with times that ticked like a clock nobody could stop. The storm didn't just wash away footprints, it washed away certainty, and when the water sank back into the ditches and the palms stopped thrashing, the town woke up to a cleaner world that felt dirtier than before, because now the case had gaps big enough for anything to crawl through. Deputies drove the same loops with the same tired eyes, scanning shoulders of roads for discarded fabric, scanning canals for a surface that looked wrong, scanning the faces at gas stations for brimmed hats and calm hands, and every time they found nothing, the nothing started to feel intentional, like it was being arranged, like someone had planned for the storm, counted on it, and smiled into the rain. In the sheriff's office, the air smelled like wet paper and coffee left too long on a burner, and the walls seemed to sweat with pinned-up flyers and maps and that one photograph of Marlene that refused to stop smiling, as if the expression itself was an accusation, as if it was saying, "You had me, and you let me go." The threatening notes changed the temperature in the building. They were no longer pranks. They were no longer sick kids. They were a presence that walked in without opening the door. Dempsey began locking his office at night. A deputy started checking under his patrol car before turning the key. The dispatcher stopped answering unknown calls with her name. They didn't say it out loud, but they all felt it: the killer had eyes. Not just eyes on Marlene, eyes on them. The case wasn't a file on a desk anymore. It was a shadow in the corner, listening. Roy Hatcher couldn't stop thinking about the mirror line. Watching mirror. It was such a small phrase, and it felt like the entire case was folded inside it. Someone was watching through reflections because he didn't want direct contact. Someone was using angles. Someone was avoiding being seen doing the looking. Roy started visiting every place in town with a mirror positioned behind a counter: bars, diners, liquor stores, places where a man could sit and observe without turning his head. He did it quietly, off the books, because Dempsey wanted solid, and Roy didn't have solid. He had instincts sharp enough to cut himself. He carried a notepad, not Marlene's spiral notebook. He refused that kind of symmetry, but something plain, and he wrote down the same kinds of details he'd once thought were meaningless. Blue pickup. Dented tailgate. Brimmed hat. Calm hands. It was at a truck stop 30 miles inland where the first real crack appeared, not like a clean break but like a hairline fracture you only see when the light hits it right. The place was a slab of asphalt surrounded by pine scrub, humming with diesel engines and the stale sweetness of spilled soda. Roy sat at the counter nursing coffee that tasted like pennies, watching the mirror behind the cashier. A man walked in. Lean. Tan. Brimmed hat. And Roy felt the hairs on his forearms lift as if the body knew before the mind could argue. The man didn't look around the room the normal way. He didn't do the quick scan of exits like a paranoid drifter. He didn't do the relaxed drift of a traveler. He kept his head still and used the mirror. Eyes flicking, measuring, absorbing. Controlled. Roy's pulse climbed and then steadied, because adrenaline is loud but training is louder. He didn't move. He didn't reach for his badge. He didn't even blink too hard. He let the man order, pay cash, pick up a pack of cigarettes, and leave. Then Roy followed at a distance, stepping into the heat like it was a second skin. Outside, the man walked to a blue pickup. Not dented tailgate, Roy realized immediately, too clean, too intact, but blue, the exact bruised shade you see everywhere in Florida. Roy watched him get in, watched his hands on the wheel, fingers long, precise. The truck pulled out onto the highway and disappeared between pines. Roy stood still for a second, anger and hope tangling in his throat, because the case had taught him a cruel rule: even when you see something, you might be seeing a decoy. He went back inside and spoke to the cashier, a woman with tired eyes and a voice that could have cut through steel. "That guy in the hat," Roy said casually. "You know him?" The cashier snorted. "Comes through once in a while," she said. "Pays cash. Never smiles. You want his name? You're gonna have to ask him, and good luck with that." "Where's he headed?" Roy asked. The cashier jerked her chin toward the map of routes behind the register, grease stains like continents. "Always same direction. Toward the coast. Toward that motel strip." Then she narrowed her eyes. "Why?" Roy didn't answer. He left the truck stop with a headache, because "comes through once in a while" wasn't enough to arrest anyone, but it was enough to wake something up. A man like that was a pattern. A man like that could be a habit. Back at the sheriff's office he presented it carefully. No drama, no "I saw the killer," just facts. Truck stop. Mirror watcher. Blue pickup. Cash. Coastbound. Dempsey listened with his jaw clenched, because Roy was giving him smoke and asking him to believe there was fire. The state agents were worse. They smirked and asked Roy if he was sure he hadn't just profiled an innocent trucker with a hat. Roy felt his face heat, but he didn't back down. "He matches details we have," he said. "Not all. But enough." "Enough for what?" a state agent asked. "Enough to keep me awake," Roy thought. "Enough to make me feel like I'm standing behind Marlene, watching through the same mirror." Aloud, he said, "Enough to watch him." Dempsey finally nodded, slow and grudging. "Fine," he said. "Watch him. Quiet. If you spook him, I'll have your badge." Roy took 2 deputies he trusted, men who didn't talk too much, men who didn't need to be heroes, and they set up a loose surveillance net around the motel strip. Not like in the movies, no fancy radios and clean suits. Just unmarked cars, a borrowed camera, a lot of sweating in parked vehicles while mosquitoes whined like tiny sirens. They watched gas stations. They watched diners. They watched the convenience store payphone like it was a shrine to the case. Days passed. The town kept living like it was trying to pretend it wasn't terrified. And the killer, if he was the killer, didn't show. Then, on a Wednesday night, the phone rang again. 2:17 a.m. exactly. Same time as before, like the caller was marking an anniversary that didn't belong to him. The dispatcher's hands shook so hard she almost dropped the receiver. She didn't speak first this time. She just listened, because the silence was the hook, and she knew it. Breathing. Then the voice, low and clipped, calm as a man reading a grocery list. "You're wasting your night in parking lots," it said. The dispatcher swallowed. "Who are you?" she managed. A soft sound, almost a laugh but not quite. "Tell Dempsey," the voice said, "mirrors don't lie. People do." The line clicked dead. In the aftermath, nobody moved for a full 10 seconds. It was like the building itself had to process the violation. Dempsey stormed out of his office, face red, eyes wild. "Trace it," he barked, like rage could speed up technology. The dispatcher stammered that they were trying, that the system wasn't built for miracles, that payphones didn't leave footprints the way people did. Dempsey slammed his fist on the counter hard enough to rattle a stack of forms. For a moment, he looked less like a sheriff and more like a man watching his authority bleed out on the floor. Roy felt sick, but not surprised. The call wasn't just a taunt. It was intelligence. "You're wasting your night in parking lots." That meant the caller knew about the surveillance. That meant someone had told him, or he'd seen them, or he predicted it because he understood law enforcement like a craftsman understands tools. Roy stared at the phone as if it might sprout a face. "He's inside our orbit," Roy murmured. The state agents shifted uneasily. One muttered about leaks. Another muttered about a local with access. Dempsey's eyes went to his own deputies, scanning faces for betrayal. That look, suspicion aimed inward, was exactly what the killer wanted. It fractured trust. It turned partners into liabilities. It made every conversation feel recorded. The next day, a new tip came in that carried the sharp scent of truth. A young woman named Lisa Monroe walked into the station trembling so hard her teeth clicked. 19. College student from a town up the coast. She said she'd been followed the night before while driving back from her boyfriend's house. A blue pickup had sat on her tail, headlights close enough to swallow her rearview mirror. When she pulled into a gas station, the truck had pulled in too. A man in a brimmed hat got out. Calm. Slow. No hurry. He walked toward her car and tapped the glass with one knuckle, not aggressive, not frantic, just a quiet insistence that felt worse than shouting. "What did he say?" Roy asked, voice gentle. Lisa swallowed, eyes glossy with fear. "He didn't say my name," she whispered. "He said, you shouldn't drive alone." Like it was advice. Like it was a rule. "What did you do?" Roy asked. Her voice broke. "I drove off. I ran the light. I didn't stop until I got home. And when I got home, I kept thinking about the girl. Marlene. I kept thinking, what if she didn't run the light? What if she stopped?" Roy felt his stomach turn. "Did you see the truck's plate?" he asked. Lisa shook her head. "It had mud on it," she said. Like it was meant to. That detail hit Roy like cold water. Mud on the plate wasn't an accident. It was an eraser. It was planning. He asked her to describe the man's face, and she tried, but memory under stress is a warped mirror. She remembered the hat shadow. The jawline. The stillness. The way his eyes didn't widen when she panicked, like panic was something he expected from other people, like he'd seen it before and it didn't interest him. A sketch artist came in. Pencil scraped paper. Lisa winced at each attempt, because the face in her mind wasn't stable, it slid away like an eel. They produced a composite anyway, lean face, narrow nose, deep-set eyes, brimmed hat. It looked like 100 men in Florida and also like one man in particular, if you'd ever felt him watching you. They pinned the sketch next to Marlene's photo in the station lobby. People stared. Some nodded, saying they'd seen that face at the diner, at the beach parking lot, near the payphone. Others shook their heads, saying it looked like their uncle, their neighbor, the mechanic down the road. That was the curse of composites, they make everyone suspect and no one caught. Dempsey finally authorized a bigger move. Roadblocks. Patrol saturation. A pressure campaign. The state agents approved because it made them look busy. The town hated it because it made them feel trapped. Cars lined up under the sun while deputies peered inside, eyes scanning for hats, for calm faces, for women alone. Kids cried. Men shouted. Tourists complained. And somewhere, the killer, if he was in town at all, would have watched the chaos with satisfaction, because chaos makes mistakes easier. Chaos makes people desperate enough to point fingers. The pressure campaign produced one valuable thing, a license plate number, partial, reported by an elderly man who'd seen a blue pickup parked near the convenience store payphone just after midnight. He'd written it down because he didn't like the way the truck was angled, like it was waiting. The first 3 characters were clear. The rest were smeared, but it was enough to narrow the search to a handful of vehicles registered in nearby counties. Deputies knocked on doors. Checked garages. Found blue pickups owned by fishermen, by carpenters, by fathers with soft bellies and tired smiles. Innocent men who stared at the sketch and shook their heads and said they'd never even been to the Pelican Palms. Then they found one that didn't fit. A blue pickup registered to a man named Kenneth Rourke. Roy felt his heartbeat punch his ribs. Room 17. The ledger. The ghost name. Now the name had a vehicle. An address? A thin line of reality. They drove to the listed address, a rented trailer on the outskirts of a different town, surrounded by scrub and rusted lawn equipment. The door was unlocked. Inside, the trailer was nearly empty, like it had never been lived in. No photos. No dishes. No clothes in drawers. Just a mattress on the floor, a chair, and a small table with an ashtray full of cigarette butts, the filters bitten hard, chewed like a nervous habit. The air smelled stale, like the place had been abandoned recently. In the corner, a cardboard box held a camera, old but functional, with rolls of undeveloped film beside it. Roy stared at it, throat dry, because a camera meant photographs, and photographs meant control, and control was the signature that kept repeating. They bagged everything. They checked the mattress. Under it, they found a folded map of the coastline with circles drawn in red pen, payphone locations, motel clusters, beach pull-offs. A web of stops. A route. Not random. Not impulsive. A hunter's circuit. But no Rourke. He was gone. And with him went any illusion that they were closing in. Because now the case had transformed again. It wasn't only about finding Marlene. It was about catching a man who knew how close the net was before it tightened. It was about a predator who could feel pressure in the air and slip through the smallest opening. Roy stood in that empty trailer, staring at the circled map, and the reality settled on him like damp clothes. They weren't chasing a suspect anymore. They were chasing a method. The state agents rushed the evidence to a lab, promising answers. But labs were slow, and 1974 didn't have miracles on demand. Fingerprints might match, might not. Film might show faces, might show nothing. Meanwhile, the town spiraled deeper into that special kind of horror reserved for cases that won't resolve, the horror of being watched by someone you can't see, of being threatened by someone who speaks in calm sentences, of realizing the most dangerous person in your world isn't a monster in the woods but a man who can stand under fluorescent lights buying cigarettes and look completely ordinary. That night, Evelyn Kessler sat at her kitchen table with Marlene's chain laid out in front of her like a relic, fingers tracing the tiny starfish pendant again and again until her skin went raw. Outside, the wind moved through the palms with a sound like distant applause, and she hated it, because it sounded like the town cheering for its own forgetting. She whispered Marlene's name into the quiet as if naming her could anchor her, as if a name could weigh enough to keep a person from drifting into the cold case future. And somewhere out there, beyond the motel strip and the payphone, beyond the circles on the map and the mud on the plates, A man without a real name listened to the radio, read the headlines, watched his own sketch pinned to a wall, and felt the case becoming exactly what he wanted, a story that could swallow years, a mystery that could infect a community, a wound that would never close cleanly. Because the most chilling thing about an unsolved disappearance isn't the darkness it starts in, it's the way it teaches everyone to live with darkness as if it belongs. The film sat in a brown evidence envelope like it had weight, like it could bend the whole case if you opened it the wrong way, and in that interim, between finding the camera and seeing what it held, the town lived inside a pause that felt worse than motion, because a pause gives your imagination room to run, and imagination doesn't follow rules. Roy Hatcher watched the lab tech take the rolls with gloved fingers, watched the envelope disappear behind a swinging door, and felt the case slipping into someone else's hands, into fluorescent corridors and paperwork and the slow grind of procedure, and procedure had never saved anyone who was already missing. Outside the station, reporters waited like vultures in pressed shirts, asking questions that were sharpened into accusations. Is this your suspect, Deputy Hatcher? Is this the man from room 17? Is the sheriff finally admitting this is a serial abduction? Can you confirm there were photographs? Photographs of what, exactly? And Roy kept his face blank because anything he said would become a headline, and headlines were fuel. And this case had enough fire. When he drove back toward the coast, the sky looked too clean, that bright Florida blue that always made tragedy seem staged, and the roads felt narrower than they had last month, as if fear had tightened them. He passed the convenience store with the payphone and saw a woman hold the receiver like it might bite her. He passed the Pelican Palms and saw the manager scrubbing the front steps like shame could be bleached out with soap. He passed a line of tourists in flip-flops, their faces pink from sun, their laughter spilling across the sidewalk, and it hit him like a blunt object. This town was living two different lives at the same time, a postcard life and a nightmare life, and they were starting to bleed into each other. Inside the sheriff's office, Dempsey tried to keep the lid on the pressure, but pressure didn't care about lids. He had state agents breathing down his neck, the county commissioner calling twice a day, local businessmen complaining about panic ruining commerce, and Marlene's mother sitting in the waiting room like a silent judge. Evelyn didn't cry anymore. Crying had an end. This didn't. She watched everyone who came and went, studied their hands, their eyes, their hesitations, like she was collecting evidence the police were too slow to see. When Roy walked past her, she stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Did you find him?" she asked, no greeting, no softening. Roy swallowed. "We found where he was," he said carefully. "That's different." Evelyn's mouth tightened. "Different doesn't bring my daughter home," she said. Roy wanted to promise her something. A name. A timeline. A certainty. But promises were lies in cases like this. He nodded once and moved on, because stopping would mean admitting he was afraid too. That afternoon the state lab called. Not with answers. With a warning. The film was professionally handled, the tech said, kept cool, stored properly, not exposed to heat or water, as if the photographer cared about preservation. That alone made Roy's stomach knot, because it meant the killer wasn't impulsive, he was archival. He wasn't just doing something. He was keeping it. They developed the first roll. The lab tech's voice on the phone was flat, but the flatness carried weight. "Deputy," he said, "you should come see this." Roy drove inland like the road was a fuse. When he arrived, the tech handed him glossy prints still smelling faintly of chemicals. Roy's eyes went to the first image and stayed there too long. A payphone. The same one outside the convenience store. Shot from across the street, slightly elevated, as if taken from a vehicle window or a second-story angle. The next image, the Pelican Palms sign, lit at night, palm fronds blurred by wind. The next, the motel parking lot, cars spaced out like teeth. The next, a close shot of the diner window, the reflection of a counter mirror visible inside, and in that reflection, faint but unmistakable, a woman behind the counter. Marlene. Her hair tied back. Her uniform crisp. Her face turned slightly toward the mirror, as if she sensed eyes. Roy felt his throat tighten. This wasn't a random tourist snapshot. This was surveillance. This was proof that whoever held the camera had been watching her before she vanished, charting her routine the way a predator charts prey. A cold, organized hunger. He flipped to another print and his pulse lurched. Marlene again, stepping out of the diner door into the night, captured mid-motion, her profile caught by the parking lot light. Another print, her yellow Maverick from a distance, as if the photographer had stayed back, patient. Another, the mangrove pull-off, empty except for her car parked at an angle. The time stamp on the print edge, if the camera's settings were accurate, suggested the car was there earlier than anyone had believed, earlier than the official timeline Dempsey had been repeating to the press. Roy felt anger flare, because the storm had washed evidence away, but it hadn't washed away the mistake. They'd been searching on a clock that was already wrong. Then came the image that made Roy's fingers go numb. A close-up of a notebook page. Marlene's spiral notebook, open. The list of times. The blocky handwriting. And beside it, in the frame's corner, a hand, male, lean, with a cigarette between the fingers. The nails were trimmed short. The skin looked suntanned, the knuckles slightly scarred. No rings. No identifying marks except one thing that Roy couldn't stop staring at, the cigarette was held perfectly steady. No shake. No nervous fidget. Control in a single gesture. The next print was worse. A mirror. Not the motel's mirror, not the diner mirror. A bathroom mirror, the kind you'd find in a trailer. In the mirror's reflection, the brim of a hat. A sliver of face, mostly shadow. And behind that shadow, pinned to the wall like trophies, were clippings. Newspaper clippings. Marlene's face. The word missing. The town's fear turned into paper, collected like memorabilia. Roy's mouth went dry. He looked at the lab tech. Is there more? The tech nodded and slid another stack of prints across the table, as if moving them too fast might unleash something. Roy forced himself to keep flipping. More payphones. Different locations. More motel signs. More parking lots. More women photographed from a distance, walking alone, loading groceries, pumping gas, standing outside a laundromat. Not all Marlene. Not all from this town. A pattern spanning miles. A route, like the circled map under the mattress, now proven in grainy images. The case had just expanded, violently, from one disappearance into a possible chain. Roy felt something crack in him, not panic, not yet, but a hard, cold clarity. If this man was collecting women on a circuit, then Marlene wasn't a singular tragedy. She was a point on a line. And if she was a point on a line, then the line might continue. He brought the prints back like contraband, locked them in Dempsey's office, and watched the sheriff's face change as he studied them. Dempsey's bluster drained out by degrees, replaced by something uglier, the recognition that the killer wasn't just ahead of them. He'd been documenting them, documenting their blind spots, documenting the very moments they later argued about in the station. Dempsey's jaw flexed. Jesus, he whispered, and Roy had never heard him sound small. State agents wanted to go public with the expanded threat, warn nearby counties, release the sketch again, run payphone stakeouts, coordinate roadblocks across a wider region. Dempsey resisted, because public warnings could cause panic, and panic made sheriffs look incompetent, and Dempsey was a politician whether he admitted it or not. Roy argued back, and the argument turned into something louder than the walls could hold. He's photographing women, Roy said, stabbing a finger at the prints. He's selecting. He's hunting. And you want me to tell the whole county there's a hunter on the loose? Dempsey snapped. You think that helps? It helps the next girl run the light, Roy said, voice tight. Dempsey stared at him, eyes hard. You want to make decisions, Hatcher? Get elected sheriff. Roy left the office shaking, because authority was getting in the way of survival, and survival didn't care about elections. That night, the case struck again, not in the way they expected, not with a body in a ditch, but with a scream that didn't get buried in rumor. A call came in from a gas station off the highway, 15 miles north, a place lit by harsh fluorescence and surrounded by nothing but darkness. A young woman had been attacked in the restroom. She was alive. Injured, terrified, but alive. And the details in the first report hit Roy like a set of handcuffs snapping shut. Brimmed hat. Calm voice. No hurry. A warning delivered like advice. You shouldn't be alone, the attacker had said, just like Lisa Monroe's story. Roy and 2 deputies drove north with sirens off, because sirens announce you before you arrive, and this killer seemed to hear everything. At the gas station, the scene felt eerily familiar, too tidy, too staged. The restroom door hung slightly ajar. The floor was wet where someone had tried to clean. The clerk hovered nearby, face gray. The victim sat on the curb outside, wrapped in a blanket, shaking so hard the blanket shivered. Her name was Angela Mart. 24. Passing through. She hadn't heard about Marlene. She hadn't seen the flyers. She was just another woman on a highway that didn't warn you it had teeth. Roy crouched in front of her, keeping his voice low, steady. Angela, he said, I need you to tell me what you remember. Any detail. Anything. Angela stared past him at the dark beyond the gas station lights, eyes wide as if she was still seeing the hat shadow. He came in after me, she whispered. Not fast. He didn't rush. He waited until the clerk turned away. Her voice trembled. He didn't smell like sweat. He smelled like clean. Like soap. She swallowed. He told me to be quiet. He told me I was making it harder for myself. Her hands clenched the blanket. He kept looking at the mirror in the restroom. Like he needed to see the door without turning. Roy felt his spine tighten. The mirror again. Always the mirror. Did you see his face? Roy asked. Angela nodded slowly. A little, she said. He had a thin scar on his cheek. Not big. Like an old cut. She raised a shaking hand and traced a line on her own face to show him. And his eyes, she hesitated, as if the memory hurt. They were calm. That's what scared me. He wasn't angry. He wasn't drunk. He was just doing something. How did you get away? Roy asked, because he needed to understand what Marlene hadn't had. Angela's breath hitched. A trucker came in, she whispered. He heard me. He yelled. And the man, he didn't run. He walked out. Like he had time. Like he knew nobody would follow. Roy stood up, anger rising like heat. A man who could walk away from an attempted abduction under lights, under witnesses, because he believed, correctly, that he could vanish into the highway before anyone organized themselves. That kind of confidence wasn't born overnight. It was built. Practiced. Reinforced. They canvassed the lot and found tire tracks, fresh, deep, angled for a quick exit. The clerk said he saw a blue pickup pull out without headlights for a second, then click them on once it hit the road, a trick used by men who didn't want to be remembered. Roy tasted metal in his mouth. It was him. Or someone who had studied him. Back at the station, Dempsey couldn't deny it anymore. A living victim changed the case's posture. It forced the sheriff's hand. Alerts went out to neighboring counties. The sketch was updated with the cheek scar. Road patrols increased. Payphones were watched, because payphones had become this killer's altar, the place he returned to like a ritual. And still, he didn't show. Instead, he sent another message. It arrived at the gas station Angela had been attacked in, taped under the payphone receiver as if it belonged there. The clerk found it at dawn and called police with his voice cracking. Roy drove up and peeled the paper free with tweezers, because even paper could carry a killer's fingerprints, and every fingerprint felt like a lottery ticket. The message was short, block letters, calm as ever, "You're late." Roy stared at it until the words blurred, because it wasn't just taunting them for missing him. It was implying a schedule. A deadline. A plan that continued regardless of their frantic improvisation. "You're late" meant he had expected them sooner at the gas station, expected them before Angela, expected them to anticipate him. It was the language of a man who believed he owned the timeline. Dempsey called an emergency meeting, and the room filled with sweat and cigarette smoke and tension so thick it seemed to buzz. The state agents pushed for a dragnet. Roy pushed for pattern analysis, where the payphones were, where the motels clustered, which routes a blue pickup would take if it wanted quick access to isolated pull-offs. Dempsey listened, then did what sheriffs do when they are cornered. He went loud. He announced a reward. He held a press conference. He promised the community that law enforcement was closing in. He stood in front of cameras with a confident jaw and said the words people wanted to hear: progress, leads, suspect, without saying the one word he couldn't afford to say: afraid. Roy watched the broadcast and felt bile rise, because promises like that invite a killer to prove you wrong. That same evening, a call came into the radio station, again, because the killer loved an audience. The DJ answered with shaking hands, remembering the last envelope, the last photo. The voice on the line was the same one that had haunted the sheriff's office at 2:17 a.m. breathing first. Then the calm sentence, clipped and clean. "You're making it noisy," the voice said. The DJ swallowed hard. "Who are you?" A soft exhale. "A headline," the voice replied. And then, before the DJ could speak again, the line went dead, leaving the studio filled with nothing but the hum of equipment and the sense that the town had just been told, plainly, that it was being used. That its fear was being harvested. That the case was no longer just an investigation, it was a performance designed to stretch out, to exhaust, to outlast. Roy sat in his car outside the station afterward, staring at the dark highway beyond the streetlights, thinking about Marlene stepping into the night, about the camera capturing her like a specimen, about Angela's trembling voice describing a man who smelled like soap and watched mirrors, about the empty trailer with its circled map, about the killer's message, "You're late," like time itself was part of the trap. And he realized the most dangerous thing about this man wasn't his ability to disappear. It was his ability to predict. He anticipated panic. He anticipated pressure. He anticipated the way law enforcement would flood obvious places and neglect quiet ones. He anticipated that people would argue, that egos would collide, that storms would erase, that fear would make a town turn inward. Roy turned the key, engine humming low, and drove toward the coast again, because the coast was where the story began and where the killer kept returning, and as he passed the convenience store payphone he saw it hanging there, silent, innocent looking, a piece of metal and glass that had become a mouth for something that refused to show its face. The phone didn't ring. But Roy could still hear the breathing in his head, that calm inhale and exhale that sounded like patience, and he understood with a chilling certainty that this case wasn't waiting to be solved, it was waiting to be survived, and the longer it went on, the more it would change the town into something that looked normal in daylight and felt ruined at night, because unsolved cases don't just steal people, they steal the belief that anything is safe when the lights go out. At night the payphones stopped looking like harmless metal boxes and started looking like traps, little glass booths glowing at the edge of darkness, waiting for a hand to lift the receiver, waiting for a voice to slide out, waiting for the town to flinch on cue. Roy parked across from the convenience store and killed the engine, letting the hush settle in around him, letting the windshield turn into a one-way mirror, because that was what this case had become, mirrors watching mirrors, eyes hunting eyes, everybody trying to see without being seen. A deputy sat 2 cars down with a camera and a thermos, pretending to be bored, and boredom was the only mask that worked in a place where fear was starting to show on people's faces like sunburn. The press conference had done what press conferences always do in cases like this, it made the sheriff look brave and it made the killer feel invited. By dusk, half the town knew about the headline call. By midnight, everyone knew. By 1 in the morning, the phone booth was being watched not just by cops but by locals driving slow, making loops, stopping with their lights off for a second to stare, and that kind of civilian curiosity was another problem, because it made camouflage easy. One more car. One more shadow. One more figure lingering near glass. Who would notice the right one? Roy's radio crackled low with updates from other units posted at other payphones on the coast, a rough net thrown across a stretch of road that was too wide and too dark to ever feel secure. Every few minutes a deputy murmured, "Nothing here," and the repetition built a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. Nothing here. Nothing here. Nothing here. Roy stared at the booth and imagined the man in the hat standing inside it, holding the receiver like a ritual object, breathing quietly, deciding who would suffer next. The trucker who'd saved Angela had come in earlier to give a statement. Big man, sun-cracked skin, hands like worn leather. He didn't want attention. He wanted to get back on the road. He said he'd heard a muffled sound from the restroom and followed it because something in him didn't like the silence. When he'd pushed the door, he'd seen the hat, the jawline, the controlled movement of a man stepping away without panic, and the part that haunted the trucker wasn't the violence, it was the calm. He looked at me, the trucker had said, voice low, shamed, and it felt like he was memorizing me. He'd tried to chase. He'd gotten outside fast. But the blue pickup had already slipped out, rolling smooth and quiet, like it had been waiting for the exact second to leave. "Did you see the plate?" Roy had asked. The trucker had squinted, digging into the memory like it was a splinter. "I saw a corner," he'd said. "Bottom right. There was a little sticker. Orange. Like a county registration." Then he'd shaken his head. "But the numbers? No. Mud. Deliberate mud. Deliberate." That word kept showing up in Roy's head like a bruise. Deliberate calls. Deliberate cleaning. Deliberate maps. Deliberate fear. The plan for tonight was simple because simple plans survive contact with chaos longer than clever ones do. If the phone rang at 2:17, Roy wanted someone close enough to hear the first breath and fast enough to run the trace before the line died. If a blue pickup appeared, Roy wanted plates, tires, direction, anything that could be held in a hand. If a man in a hat walked toward a woman in the parking lot, Roy wanted to put him on the ground before he could speak. The stakes weren't, solve the case. The stakes were, stop the next one. 2:10 a.m. The booth sat empty. The neon sign over the convenience store buzzed faintly. Somewhere a bug smacked into a street light and fell. Roy's eyes ached from staring. He glanced at his rearview mirror and saw his own face, pale and tense, and for a moment it hit him like a slap. He was watching a mirror too. The case was infecting him, turning him into a man who couldn't look straight at anything. 2:15, a car rolled in and stopped by the pump. A woman stepped out, alone, wearing shorts and a light blouse, hair pulled up, keys between her fingers like tiny claws. Roy's chest tightened. He wanted to drive over, tell her to leave, tell her she was a target just by being alone under lights. But if he did, he'd spook the entire trap. He'd warn the killer that police were here, thinking, predicting. Roy held still. He hated himself for it. 2:16, the woman glanced toward the payphone. Just a glance. An instinct. She looked away quickly, as if she didn't want to admit she was scared. She started pumping gas with jerky movements. 2:17, the phone rang. It wasn't a loud ring. Not dramatic. Just a sharp mechanical sound cutting clean through the quiet, and every muscle in Roy's body went tight at once. The woman froze mid-pump, eyes snapping to the booth. Roy was already moving, door opening, 1 foot out, radio in his hand, and he saw it, movement in the dark beyond the lot, a shape crossing the edge of light like it knew exactly where the cameras were pointed and exactly where they weren't. Unit 2, Roy hissed into the radio. Phone's ringing. Movement east tree line. He didn't run straight at the booth. He ran the angle. He kept the light behind him. He watched the glass for a reflection. The receiver lifted. Someone inside the booth. Hat brim, shadowed. A slim shoulder. A hand raising the receiver with a calm that felt obscene. Roy drew his weapon but kept it low, because the moment he raised it, the moment he shouted, the moment he turned this into a scene, the killer would vanish into the dark like a thought. Roy closed distance fast, boots silent on asphalt, eyes locked on that sliver of silhouette. The ring stopped. The line connected. Roy reached the booth and saw his own reflection layered over the killer's shape, 2 men occupying the same glass, and for a fraction of a second he couldn't tell which one looked more haunted. "Step out," Roy said, voice hard. "Now." The figure didn't flinch. Didn't turn. Didn't even shift weight. The receiver stayed at his ear. Roy could see the cigarette between the figure's fingers, ember glowing steady. No shake. No fear. Roy moved closer, pressed his palm against the booth door, ready to yank it open. The figure's voice drifted through the thin glass, soft enough that it could have been meant only for the receiver, only for whoever was on the other end. "You're loud," the figure murmured. Roy's blood went cold. The voice matched. The calm matched. The breathing matched. "Now," Roy repeated, louder, because there are moments when authority has to become sound. The figure turned his head slightly, just enough that Roy caught the thin scar on the cheek, a pale line like a smile that never learned warmth. And I met Roy's in the reflection. Calm. Assessing. Almost curious. Like Roy was the specimen now. And then, with the receiver still to his ear, the figure lifted his free hand and tapped the glass once with his knuckle. A tiny, intimate gesture. The same tap Lisa Monroe had described on her window. Roy felt rage surge. He grabbed the boot door handle and yanked. The boot was locked from the inside. Of course it was. The figure's mouth moved, speaking into the phone. "He's here," he said, like he was reporting weather. Roy slammed the glass with the heel of his hand. "Open it." The figure didn't. Instead he reached up, calm as a man adjusting a tie, and the brimmed hat came off, revealing hair slicked back, dark, and the face underneath was not monstrous, not deformed, not cinematic, just a man's face. Ordinary enough to walk through any grocery store. Ordinary enough to sit at any counter. That ordinariness hit Roy harder than any mask would have, because it meant this predator didn't need a disguise. He was the disguise. The figure placed the hat carefully on the shelf inside the booth, like he was setting down a promise, like he was leaving something behind on purpose. Then he hung up. The line clicked dead. Roy's radio exploded with voices, units calling in, tires squealing, someone shouting that a blue pickup was leaving the far side of the lot. Roy's head snapped right. He saw it, a blue truck rolling out from behind the convenience store, lights off for a heartbeat, then on, gliding toward the highway like it had rehearsed this exit 100 times. "Go!" Roy barked into the radio. "Blue pickup. Northbound." He turned back to the booth, hard hammering, and the silhouette inside had shifted. The man's hand dropped to the booth's lower panel where a latch should have been. The glass door popped open just an inch. Roy shoved forward, trying to force it wider, but the man's shoulder hit it from the inside, controlled force, and the gap stayed narrow, just enough. Just enough for a thin hand to slip through. The man's fingers emerged, fast and precise, and flicked something onto the ground at Roy's feet. A cigarette butt. Then the fingers withdrew. The door snapped shut. Roy stared down and saw the butt, filter-bitten hard, the same chewed habit from the trailer ashtray. Evidence delivered like a tip. Like a joke. Like a signature. He looked up again. The booth was empty. No shattering glass. No dramatic exit. No sprinting figure. Just empty air and Roy's reflection staring back at him like it had been the only occupant all along. Roy grabbed the handle, yanked it wide, stepped inside, and felt the stale smell of smoke. The hat sat on the shelf like a gift. The phone line hummed with a dial tone. He checked behind the booth, the side, the narrow strip between it and the building. Nothing. No footsteps. No crunch of gravel. No movement. It didn't make sense until his eyes snagged on something near the base of the booth, a maintenance hatch, a panel that should have been sealed. The screws were fresh, the metal edges scuffed. Someone had been working on it recently. Someone had made an exit where exits weren't supposed to exist. Roy dropped to his knees and ripped the panel open. A dark cavity yawned beneath, leading into a narrow service crawl space that ran behind the store's exterior wall, plumbing, wires, and a passage just wide enough for a lean man to slip through and vanish into the maze of back lots and dumpsters and darkness. Roy felt nausea rise. The killer hadn't just escaped. He'd engineered the escape. He'd chosen the phone booth because it wasn't a booth tonight, It was a stage built with trapdoors. Behind him, sirens screamed as units chased the blue pickup up the highway. Roy stayed kneeling in the booth, fingers clenched around the hat, because something told him the chase would end the way everything else ended in this case, with nothing but distance. Minutes later the radio confirmed it, voices spitting frustration through static. The pickup had cut off onto a side road, then another, then disappeared into a web of unlit lanes. A deputy thought he saw it turn near a citrus grove. Another swore it headed toward the marsh. Tire tracks were lost in wet sand. The storm's leftover dampness had softened everything, swallowing impressions like a mouth. They'd searched for an hour, then two, then dawn began to push grey light into the world, and the pickup was gone like it had never existed. Roy carried the hat back to the station in an evidence bag. Felt too light for what it represented. Dempsey stared at it like it was a snake. State agents argued over whether to announce the near capture. Roy wanted to scream because it wasn't a near capture, it was a demonstration, and the killer had just proven something brutally important. He could stand inches from law enforcement, speak into his own ritual phone, look straight at the man hunting him, and still leave on his own terms. They processed the hat. They processed the booth. They bagged the cigarette but like it was a lottery ticket. Fingerprints came back smeared. Partial. Unusable. The cigarette but had saliva, maybe. Enough for future science, the lab tech said, in a tone that sounded like a curse. Future science. Not now. Not in 1974. Not when Marlene had been missing for weeks and the town was already chewing on its own fear. The convenience store clerk swore he'd never seen anyone messing with the phone booth hatch. He swore it on his mother. He swore it with eyes too wide. Roy didn't know if the clerk was lying, paid, threatened, or simply blind the way people become blind when they are afraid to notice. That was the other infection of this case, it taught people not to see. Evelyn saw the hat when Roy walked it past the waiting room, and her face changed, something sharp, something hungry, something like grief turning into a weapon. "That's his?" she asked. "We think so," Roy said. Evelyn's voice stayed steady, but her hands trembled. "You touched it," she said, not accusing, just noticing, as if she was cataloguing his choices the way Marlene had catalogued details. "You touched what touched her." Roy didn't have words that would not sound hollow. He kept walking. He felt the hat's weight in his hand long after he'd set it down, because evidence isn't just objects in bags, evidence is contact, evidence is closeness, and closeness without resolution is torture. That night the town talked about the chase like it was almost a victory, because humans are desperate to turn almost into something that feels like progress. They almost got him, people said at bars, as if, almost, was a net around a ghost. They've got his hat, they said, as if cloth could speak. They've got his cigarette, they said, as if a chewed filter could confess. The paper ran a headline that tried to look triumphant and ended up looking scared. Mystery caller cited, escapes again. Roy sat alone in his car after shift, parked near the beach where the tide rolled in and out like breathing, and he stared at the dark water until his eyes burned. Somewhere out there, Marlene's chain had surfaced like a taunt. Somewhere out there, the wrong water waited with its own silence. Roy thought about the service hatch, the trapdoor built into a payphone booth, and he understood the kind of mind that does that, a mind that doesn't just react, but prepares, a mind that doesn't just flee, but scripts, a mind that turns ordinary public space into private control. When he finally drove home, he caught his reflection in the rearview mirror again, his own eyes red-rimmed, his own face drawn tight, and for a sick second he wondered what the killer had seen in him when they'd faced each other through that glass. Not fear. Not respect. Something worse, recognition. Two men living inside the same case, one trying to close it, one trying to keep it open forever, and the difference between them felt thinner than Roy wanted to admit. The next morning, at 2:17 a.m. sharp, every phone in the sheriff's office stayed silent, and the silence didn't feel like relief. It felt like the killer had moved on, satisfied, leaving them with a hat that wouldn't talk and a cigarette but that belonged to a future that hadn't arrived yet, and as the sun rose bright and brutal over the coast, the town woke up to the same nightmare dressed in daylight, and somewhere beyond the reach of roadblocks and promises, a man who called himself a headline kept breathing steadily, patient as the tide, letting time do what it always does in cases like this, turn heat into cold, turn panic into routine, turn a living search into a file with dust on it, and turn Marlene Kessler into a name that people would say softer each year, as if lowering their voices could keep the mystery from hearing them. The hat sat under glass in the evidence room like a captive that refused to speak, and every time Roy walked past it he felt the same sour twist in his gut, because trophies work both ways. Sometimes you take something from the predator, and sometimes the predator leaves something on you. The cigarette butt was worse. It was tiny, pathetic, chewed down to a damp filter that should have meant nothing, but it became a kind of curse, because everyone in that building knew it held the closest thing to the man's body they were ever going to touch, and still it wouldn't give them a name. The lab tech called it biological material, said it like a promise. Roy heard it like a delay. In 1974, biological material was a locked door with no key yet. Dempsey tried to turn the near catch into a victory. He liked the way it looked on camera. Sheriff's office confronts suspect, suspect escapes but leaves evidence, investigation intensifies. The town wanted to believe it. People needed to believe it. They needed to tell themselves the case was moving forward because the alternative was admitting that a man could build a trapdoor into a payphone booth in broad daylight and nobody would notice until it mattered. Nobody wanted to live in that world. So they chose a softer one. A world where almost counted. But Roy lived in the hard one. The hard world. The world where a predator didn't improvise, he engineered. The world where the booth's maintenance hatch wasn't just an escape route, it was a statement: I can modify your town, your routines, your infrastructure, and you won't see it until I'm already gone. Roy took 2 deputies back to the convenience store at dawn and made them walk the building's perimeter, tracing the crawlspace path like a blood trail. Behind the store, tucked between dumpsters and a fenced utility yard, they found the exit point, a loose panel leading into a narrow service corridor that connected to an older drainage system under the lot, the kind of neglected municipal artery that nobody thought about until it swallowed something important. Roy shone a flashlight into the opening and saw moisture glinting on concrete. He crawled in despite the stink, despite the spider webs, despite the voice in his head telling him this was exactly the kind of dark place a man like that would love. The space narrowed, then widened, then forked. He followed the fresher scuffs on the floor, marks that looked like heel drags and knee slides. The killer had moved through here fast, practiced, silent, and the only thing he'd left behind was a faint smear of ash on one wall, like a signature written in dirt. At one fork, Roy found a small square of tape stuck to a pipe, bright orange, the kind used by utility workers to mark sections needing repair. It shouldn't have meant anything. But it did, because orange tape was planning. Orange tape was the kind of detail Marlene had written down. Orange tape was the kind of thing a man used when he wanted to find his way back without leaving obvious footprints. Roy peeled it off and bagged it, then crawled out into daylight with grime on his forearms and a feeling that the killer had just led him through his own private hallway, giving him a tour, laughing silently the entire time. The next step should have been obvious: who had access to the payphone booth's maintenance panel, who had the tools, who had the knowledge, who could work under the convenience store without raising suspicion. And that meant one thing: the phone company. The phone company didn't like the sheriff's office asking questions. The phone company didn't like anyone asking questions. They were a quiet kingdom of wires and lockboxes and restricted keys. Roy and Dempsey went together, because some doors opened only for sheriffs, and even then they opened with reluctance. The manager they met wore a crisp shirt and a smile that didn't reach his eyes, like he'd been trained to treat law enforcement as a nuisance. Those panels are sealed, the manager insisted. Only authorized technicians have keys. Roy leaned forward. Then you've got a technician using his keys to help a criminal, he said, voice low. Or you've got someone who stole them. The manager's smile thinned. Our men are vetted, he said. Dempsey's patience snapped. Your men aren't saints, he growled. Give us your maintenance logs. Who serviced that payphone in the last month? The manager hesitated, weighing cooperation against liability, and Roy saw the calculation in his eyes. In that moment Roy understood something ugly. institutions protect themselves first, even when a woman is missing and a predator is playing games. The manager finally agreed to provide a list, but not the full logs, not immediately, and only through legal channels that moved slower than a man in a blue pickup. Roy wanted to reach across the desk and shake him. Instead he watched Dempsey posture, watched the manager retreat behind policy, and felt the killer's advantage widening again, not just escape routes, but bureaucracy as cover. Delay as camouflage. When the list finally arrived, it contained 3 names, 3 technicians assigned to that route. Roy stared at them like they were loaded dice. One was a man in his 50s with a spotless record and a grandchild photo on his desk. One was a young guy barely out of training who still smelled like nervousness. The third was a name that made Roy's chest tighten because it echoed something he'd seen before, partial overlap with the motel ledger, the kind of coincidence that feels like a hook, Kenneth Rourke. Except it wasn't Kenneth Rourke. Not exactly. It was Kenneth R. Oakley. Roy read it twice, then a third time, because the brain doesn't like things that line up too neatly. Kenneth R. Oakley. Initials. A name that could be shortened, altered, blurred. A name that could become Rourke with a shift of pen and a desire to disappear. Roy looked up at Dempsey. "We need him," he said. They went to the phone company yard. The foreman said Oakley had called in sick. Dempsey demanded an address. The foreman hesitated, then gave it, eyes darting like he was trying not to become part of the story. Roy drove with his jaw clenched so hard it ached. The address led to a small apartment complex a few miles inland, stucco walls, thin doors, the kind of place where lives overlapped and nobody really knew anyone. Roy knocked. No answer. He knocked again, louder. Nothing. He tried the knob. Locked. Dempsey ordered a forced entry. The door splintered open. Inside, the apartment smelled faintly of bleach. Not the sharp clean of a person who liked order, but the heavy clean of a person who wanted to erase. The rooms were mostly bare. No photos. No personal clutter. A mattress with clean sheets. A dresser with one drawer open, empty. A bathroom mirror wiped too clean. Roy walked into the kitchen and felt his blood chill. On the counter sat a pack of cigarettes, the same brand from the trailer ashtray, the same chewed filters. And beside it, neatly stacked, were keys. Not house keys. Utility keys. Several. Different sizes. Different cuts. Tools of access. Dempsey stared at them. "We've got him," he said, and for a second he sounded like he believed it. But Roy didn't. Roy knew better than to think a predator left his tools behind by accident. On the table was a note. Block letters. Calm. A single sentence, "You're still late." Dempsey's face flushed, fury climbing. Roy felt cold spread through him like water in a boot. The killer had turned their lead into a stage 2. He'd given them an apartment with props, cigarettes, keys, bleach, like he was mocking the very idea of catching him through paperwork and lists. And yet the note also meant something else, something that made Roy's spine tighten. He wanted them to know they were close enough to chase. He wanted the pressure. He wanted the attention. He needed it, the way some men need applause. They pulled every neighbor they could find. Most shrugged. One woman said she'd seen Oakley, if that was his real name, leave at odd hours, always wearing a hat, always carrying a small black bag. A man upstairs said he heard phone ringing late at night sometimes, then silence. Another neighbor said the tenant didn't talk much, but he always paid rent on time, cash, and he always smelled like soap. That detail landed like a stone. Soap. Calm. Mirror. The pattern tightened until it felt like a noose and still there was nothing inside it. Roy took the keys and ran them through records. Some matched phone company lockboxes. Others didn't. Some were older, municipal access keys for utility panels, storm drains, service corridors. It was a ring of doors. A ring of ways in and out. Roy began to understand the scale of it. This man didn't just have a route. He had an infrastructure. He moved through the town the way blood moves through veins, unseen, essential, unstoppable. Dempsey ordered an all-points bulletin for Oakley. The press got wind of it within hours, because secrets didn't survive in a town this hungry. A headline hit the paper by afternoon: phone tech sought in Kessler case. The town erupted. People screamed at the phone company, demanded inspections, demanded every booth be sealed, demanded police on every corner. Women stopped using payphones entirely. Men started escorting wives and daughters to the grocery store like they were walking through a war zone. The phone company manager held a stiff statement about cooperation and safety. Roy watched him and felt the hollowness of words. That night, another woman vanished. Not from the motel strip. Not from the convenience store. From a laundromat on the inland side of town, a place with humming machines and a line of mirrors above stainless steel sinks. Her name was Dana Whitcomb. 27. A young mother whose husband worked nights. She'd gone to wash uniforms and never came home. Her car was found in the lot, door closed, keys missing. Inside, a basket of damp clothes sat like an abandoned task. A single sock lay on the ground near the curb, as if she'd dropped it while turning, interrupted mid-motion. The scene was too tidy. The pattern repeated with a cruelty that felt personal. Roy arrived at the laundromat and felt rage pulse behind his eyes. Mirrors lined the wall. A man could watch the entrance without turning. A man could sit in a corner chair and blend with bored customers. Roy stared at the reflections until he felt dizzy. He imagined Oakley, Rourke, headline, standing behind Dana, one hand on her elbow, voice low, telling her not to make it harder, guiding her like a polite stranger, and the thought made Roy's hands shake. Dana's disappearance forced Dempsey to do what he'd resisted, treat this as a serial predator, not a single case. But naming the monster didn't shrink it. It only expanded the fear. Now 2 women were missing. Now 2 families sat in the waiting room, staring holes into the sheriff's desk. Now the town wasn't just bruised. It was bleeding. The next morning, a call came in, not at 2:17 this time, but at 2:16, as if the killer wanted to show them he could change the rhythm whenever he pleased. The dispatcher answered with a trembling breath. The voice came through, calm as ever. 2 is better, it said. The dispatcher swallowed hard. Where are they? A pause. Breathing. Then, ask the mirrors. Click. Roy listened to the recording afterward and felt something in him harden. The killer wasn't just taunting them. He was teaching them. He was forcing the town to see itself through reflection, through suspicion, through the same sideways gaze he used. He was turning everyone into watchers. And watchers stop living. Watchers stop trusting. Watchers start seeing danger in every shadow. That was the deeper crime, not just the missing bodies, but the stolen piece. They pursued Oakley harder. Checks at bus stations. Checks at motels. Patrols at phone company yards. They questioned every technician, every subcontractor, every man who'd ever held a utility key. They found a report of a blue pickup abandoned in a citrus grove 2 counties over. They rushed there, hearts racing, and found the truck burned down to a twisted skeleton, frame blackened, tires melted into the earth. No plates. No VIN legible. A fire meant to erase, meant to punish the idea of identification. Standing in the heat haze above that charred metal, Roy realized the killer was burning bridges behind him not because he was afraid, but because he wanted the chase to continue without resolution, like a story with no ending that keeps an audience hooked. Days blurred. Dana's husband walked the streets at night with a flashlight and a baseball bat, eyes wild. Evelyn Kessler started pinning Dana's flyer beside Marlene's, her kitchen wall becoming a shrine to absence. The sheriff's office became a pressure cooker. Dempsey snapped at everyone. State agents argued over jurisdiction. Roy slept in snatches, dreaming of mirrors that showed empty rooms and payphones that rang with no caller. One afternoon, Roy went back to the phone company manager's office alone. He didn't sit. He stood like a threat. Oakley, he said. I want his personnel file. I want where he came from, who hired him, references, prior addresses, everything. The manager stiffened. We gave you what we could, he said. Roy leaned in. No, he said quietly. You gave us a list. I want the truth. Because if your man used your keys to take women, and you hide behind policy, you're not just a bystander. You're part of the machine that let him do it. The manager's eyes flicked away. That flick, just a flick, told Roy everything. Fear, guilt, or both. The manager exhaled through his nose like he was swallowing something bitter. He wasn't fully processed, he admitted. He was contract. Temporary. Recommended by a man in another county. We needed hands. Temporary. Contract. A shadow with tools. Roy felt his jaw tighten until it hurt. Give me the recommender, he said. The manager hesitated again, then slid a card across the desk, eyes refusing to meet Roy's. A name. An address? Another county. Another door to knock on. Roy pocketed it and left without thanks. Outside, the sun glared off parked cars. The world looked normal. The ocean breeze still carried salt. And yet Roy felt the case deepening, not narrowing, because every lead was a corridor that split into more corridors, every door opened onto more doors, and the man they were hunting moved through that maze like he'd designed it. Roy got into his car and caught his reflection in the rearview mirror, tired eyes, clenched jaw, a face already aging under pressure, and he realized he was starting to understand the killer's true advantage. It wasn't strength. It wasn't weapons. It was structure. It was the way the world itself could be used as cover if you knew its seams. He turned the key and drove toward the next address, toward the next name, toward the next possible crack in the predator's calm, while behind him the town sat under bright Florida light and tried to pretend it wasn't changing, even as the mirrors in diners and laundromats and motel lobbies kept reflecting the same new truth back at everyone. Somebody out there was watching, and the hardest part wasn't being watched, it was knowing that the watching might never end.